Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We have another amazing guest for you today. We have with us here Elina Kokorotsis, owner of In the Works Coaching and Consulting, and she provides HR leaders with strategies for navigating overwhelming transitions while also heading the Disrupt HR Rossa chapter New York. She will share how HR professionals can lead boldly when shift happens, drawing on her experiences as a recovering perfectionist and her passion for out of the box ideas in the world of work. Elina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I'm so excited to be here with you and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We have a lot of ground to cover, a lot of interesting things. But before we get too deep into it, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
Ooh, okay. That's a tough one. I have so many of them. I'm a big Disney lover, my husband too. I think watching those movies with the kids, those movies are for adults. They are not for kids. And, Encanto was actually one of those that I wasn't expecting to just fall in love with. And at Encanto, I think it's one of the sisters. I think her name is Luisa, the strong one. And I remember when I actually was watching the movie with the kids and the song came, it's just being about, being strong and all those emotions underneath that strength. It just caught me off guard. And my kids were like, "Are you okay, Mom?" I'm like bawling my eyes out. So yeah, Luisa would be probably, that character that I identified more with. And it was just out of the blue. And I just love them.
I like that example. So many of us feel that pressure.
Yes, the pressure. And every time the song comes, or they play like Disney tracks and stuff like that. And they're like, Mommy, your song.
Yeah, I like that. And so many of those movies do have interesting, hidden messages for sure.
Yeah, definitely, a lot of messages for adults. And I mean, if you're gonna sit there and watch Disney movies with your kids, they gotta be interesting enough to captivate adults, right? But they're very deep, a lot of them. And that movie specifically, I mean, it had, perfectionistic tendencies. You had all the different characters. And I think there was a YouTuber I was looking at that went into like kind of deciphering a little bit like the characters, and a lot of them their fears come out, and just the movie itself, it's beautifully done.
I like that. I like that. Let's dive into it. First off, we like starting off the show with, what is procrastination to you? How do you define it? And what does it mean to you personally?
Okay, so I mean, in general, people think procrastination is that act of kind of like delaying or postponing tasks, right? For me, and at least in my kind of soul searching, it's really a signal. And I think it's not just about avoiding the tasks, but it's about like beneath the surface, like what's happening, why is this coming up? So I've learned that can be both an opportunity and a challenge. So it's a challenge because it kind of keeps you stuck, right, in the moment. But the opportunity can be when we actually recognize that this is my signal to start reassessing. It's my signal to maybe simplify things and take some intentional steps towards. And I'm a big fan of tiny steps. So I don't know if you have read the book by BJ Fogg, Tiny Steps, along with Atomic Habits. Those are one of the like my favorites. And it really reframed procrastination as to the key to overcoming it, or at least becoming better at it, is embracing the messiness that comes from it. And that's one of the reasons why I called my coaching and consulting business In the Works, because life is in the works in everything we do. Work is in the works. People say, I'm catching up with emails. Well, you're never going to catch up with emails. Emails will continue will be coming up. So how do you, operate in a world that burnout is a norm, in a world that change is a constant state, and, shift is going to continue to happen? The word shift for me has a huge meaning, especially, in 2025, because I am doing a lot of support for HR professionals when it comes to how they adapt to change, how they transition, and not from the perspective of just change management overall, like organizational change management, but more that transition, that internal transition, turmoil there, the emotional side of shifting and being comfortable with what's happening around you. And I mean, there is change everywhere, around us. So yeah, I can talk forever, Chris.
Well, I do have a couple of threads to pull at there, but before I pull at those, I'm sure that we'd love to know a little bit more about you, Elina. What's your journey been like? How did you get to be where you are today?
Well, it was messy. So again, in the works, right? So I was born in Albania. It's a small country in Mediterranean. And at about 7 years old, my family decided to immigrate to the country of Greece. And I say the country of Greece because here in Rochester, New York, we have Greece, New York. It's, so when I tell people locally I'm from Greece, they think I'm just, down the street, but it's the country of Greece is beautiful. I've lived there for a good, 15 or so years. My parents had a bakery and when I came to United States, I was about 21 years old and I came for college and I fell in love with the world of human resource development. Believe it or not, I'm one of those people who chose to be an HR professional. And most HR people just fall into that profession. But yeah, I chose it and I've been loving it since. So my kind of career path took me out of college into HR as an HR specialist and kind of grew into recruiting and talent and development. I was a learning and development consultant for a while. I led change initiatives within corporate, either healthcare and some IT organizations. And just, I loved working with people and supporting people, meeting where they are and supporting them in their transitions. In the past 8 years, I've been in HR strategy, HR technology. So a lot of the technical side of just taking HR operations, but how do we improve those operations so they can really focus on people and employee experiences at work? So what does it mean to have a good employee experience, when you join a company, when you maybe go on maternity leave, or when you have different transitions that are happening in your personal life? How is your organization supporting you? How is your leadership supporting you? And what is the culture that we can create to be able to provide employees with, a motivated workplace, like a place where they want to come and feel motivated to be part of? So that's where a lot of my work is. In that journey, though, solo HR professionals started reaching out. They just needed more support, and that overwhelm and the unclear kind of what they're dealing with in their organizations and their personal and professional lives have been attracting a lot of that. So, there are a lot of reaction mode, a lot of what's happening in HR. It's very overwhelming. We're, getting it from all over. You have external changes that you can't really, handle, or you can't really out of control and then you have organizational changes, you have personal, professional, there's so much that goes on. I support them in a way that they become more strategically aligned with who they are first, and then, with where they want to be and help them create that path to be able to get there.
Excellent. And thank you so much for sharing that. Excuse me. The one question I have for you, and I love asking this to people. How did you know? Can you see the point in that journey where you knew 100% that you were in the right place?
I do. It was this one. So it's interesting. I did my bachelor's here at St. John Fisher University. And, everybody was like, oh, you need an MBA. You need an MBA. And I signed up for the MBA and I took this one course. It was an elective course. It was a training and development. And literally the first class, as the instructor was sharing about what training and development is and what what HR professionals in that kind of career function or HR function do, I was just like, this is me. I've been doing this my whole life. I've been even from my first job. My first job was a cashier at a fast food restaurant in Greece. And I ended up creating a whole training program for new cashiers coming in without even knowing that's, I just saw the need and I fixed it, and I'm a problem solver. So I was in that mode of training and development my whole life. And that one class I was like, oh my God, this is it. And I started as a finance major in college. And looking back at my career now, I've had some interesting stops in business operations and IT. I worked in an IT department for a while, but that was also kind of it gave me the opportunity to learn about technology and look at HR and HR technology from a completely different lens. And now with AI, kind of, it's intense what's happening in the field of HR tech. Whereas hundreds and hundreds of vendors, companies need HR technology to some extent, from hire all the way to retire. You need tools to support employees. And what I'm loving now and what I'm seeing as a trend is that HR tech also is here to stay. AI is here to stay. But how do we take this technology and use it as a means to improving our cultures and our people operations? So that's where my next, piece of my work and my business is going towards people operations.
I would like to take just a small aside here because, the world of HR, I mean, I know that there's lots of change going on for them. There's lots of change going on in the workplace and people looking for jobs. How often do you find, and again, I ask this because normally what happens is you see, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn every day and I see all these complaints, from both sides. I see complaints from people who apply for jobs that get ghosted. They never hear back. They don't even get like an automated rejection letter or whatever. They don't even get that. And yet, the HR people come back and they say, well, they're pretty limited in terms of what they can do. And it's interesting to me. So I guess from your perspective, I mean, is it true that, the vast majority of HR departments within companies, I mean, they're in charge of basically the entire company, but they don't really have as much power as they need to have to do the things they need to do?
Yes and no. It depends on the company, of course, right? But I think right now, out of all the functions in HR, you have the different functions like recruiting and learning and development and employee relations, right? Payroll, like all those different functions. I personally think, at least from my interactions with local HR professionals, a national level too, recruiting is the biggest challenge. A lot of these AI tools are, they're being embedded in these new HR tech solutions, but HR professionals might not be ready to how to use them, or they might not know necessarily, or as they are using them, they're finding that, they post a job and they get like hundreds of resumes within an hour or two. So a lot will have to go into like, how do we solve this problem right now? So they are overwhelmed to the extent of, they will review resumes. AI will help you pick out a keyword. The algorithm will help you select the top resumes, but it's very hard to maintain that level when you have bots applying from the outside in a matter of nanoseconds, right? So there is a big influx in resumes coming in because of AI too. So you have AI on the, recruiter side and AI on the candidate side. So it's going to be interesting how this plays out. I'm trying to understand myself better how these tools work and operate. So I'm curious to see what 2025 is gonna bring. Because now you also have like very low unemployment rates. You have the retail industry and frontline workers and nurses, healthcare everywhere. There is such a shortage of roles. And, then you have companies laying off individuals. And there is so much going on right now in the world of HR.
And what do you see as the biggest sort of challenge when you start to go in and help these organizations? Do you find more of them are trying to implement more of these automated systems to cut back on personnel? Or do you find that there are still those that say, no, we'll implement these tools, yes, but we need to put people?
Yeah. And I think it has to happen in conjunction. Like when you decide to implement some of these tools, it has to happen in conjunction with what is the culture you want? What are your values? What are the behaviors you want people to exhibit? For me, technology is great, but if you're not using it to align with what you're trying to accomplish as an organization, it's pointless. And I've been in organizations that they will just implement technology for the sake of technology. 5 years down the road, they have to revisit because it wasn't the right tool or it wasn't implemented correctly because they did not have that direction at the top. So a lot of, my support with HR professionals that might not have that experience is to go in, look at their employee experience journeys and the tools they already have and the different functions of HR, and create a strategy for them that aligns with their organizational goals, their values, the culture they want to build for their employees, and what they stand for. And I love working with organizations that the values are not just that poster board and the cafeteria. So they truly live their values, and it shows by the behaviors that they have. Their leaders know how to support their people. They're there for them. They have that empathy. They live it day to day. And that's where you see, if you're at that level and you truly believe in your culture, these tools will get implemented so much more easier because you have that connection. And it's not just technology, it's what we do and how we support our people. You know what I mean?
No, I certainly know what you mean. And it can be very overwhelming too, because, uh, you know, you have these systems, you're expected to keep up. So how do you approach that when you're first, consulting and going into a situation like that? What are the first things that you tend to look for to, try and institute change?
So one is, assessing what they have. That's a big one because some of these tools, they might already have tools that they're just maybe not using correctly. So assessing where they are is a big piece of that, and understanding where they want to be and kind of, creating that path in between. For HR professionals specifically, also understanding that if they're a solo HR professional and they don't have a team, they are the ones who are doing payroll. They're the ones who are doing training. They're the ones who are, hiring people and dealing with employee relations. So sometimes they need that extra support and extra person to come in and do that strategic work, because they are constantly in this reactive this reactive mode of just go, go, go. And they don't have time for that big picture strategy to say, well, what do we actually have? Where do we want to be, and how do we get there?
And what do you, in your experience, what has been the biggest sort of hurdle? Has it been more, technology and processes, infrastructure, or has it been more people related in the last
I would say people,
3 years?
always people. Yeah. Technology, you can always figure out, implement, and this is where that change and the transition comes in place. People will have their preconceived notions, their fears will come out a lot of times. They don't want to try a new tool because they don't know how to use it, or some other fears are coming out. Corporate trauma might come up too, like you worked in different roles, and when you start a new job, you bring all that with you. And, think about it. Like, you've had experiences throughout your life. You bring your whole you into your work. Of course, decisions you make and how you approach your work is it's going to impact, how you operate. So all that, if you had trauma from a toxic environment, that will come with you. Now you're going to be more careful when you start, collaborating with people, because maybe you had a bad experience before. So you, as a leader, and at least with the leaders I work with, having those talks around, well, how do you support your employees? Maybe ask more questions to better understand where they're coming from, what experiences they had, makes HR people become more of that glue, and that is where my passion lies, in helping HR people become that glue for not just their teams, for maybe their families and the organizations they serve, and even the communities they support. Because a lot of us are out in the community too. How are we being the glue? There's enough divide in this world. There's enough divide and, wars and all sorts of stuff happening. How are we being the glue? And maybe that's something as a takeaway out of this conversation, and if you're listening, how are you being the glue in your team? If you're a leader, even if you're not a leader, with your coworkers, with other departments, how are you being the glue in your families, in, your community?
Just going back to that, and I know this might be a touchy subject for some. I've had this before, that there are leaders and there are followers, but I would argue that there's two different things. There's the leadership in terms of, kind of where you're going, but then there's leadership in terms of you as a person. And if you're a follower and you're a follower, that's great. That I've always said that if you know that, that's fine. I don't, personally, I don't try to push you to be a leader of a group or anything, but you should be leading in the aspects of being, a human being, be that example, be that friend, be that, support, different things like that. That being said, how big a disconnect do you find between HR and other departments where, they're the glue, but it's kind of like the glue, you're like making this glue ball, but nothing else is sticking to it? Is that what's going
Yeah.
on?
I think that has a lot to do of how people think of HR. A lot of when I go talk in stages too, I ask, well, what does HR do? And most people are like hiring, firing, and compliance and sexual harassment training and training or just in general or talent development. Like those are usually the answers I get. And I want to shift that answer. I want that answer to be HR is the glue between all the departments. They are the glue between how we work and operate. They are there to support and bring people together. Can we change our conversation? I would love that. And I think a lot has to do with how HR is being viewed. I collaborate a lot with IT departments, and you have to, when you do technology implementations, HR might be creating a framework of how that employee experience should look like or could look like, but IT enables it. Technology enables it. And you got to work with IT professionals. You got to bridge that gap right now. And I read an article. There was a company who, first time ever, they put IT reporting to HR. I had never seen that. And I felt it was such a bold move. And I can't remember which company it was now off the top of my head, but I was like, yes, that is exactly it. And I think that's where we're going towards. We're going towards this concept of HR for all. And I feel like every leader, every employee should have enough understanding of people dynamics and people so that we can all be the glue and collaborate and be able to work on projects without having tensions. Like, why? Talk to each other. And I think with AI, right, that machine and the technology amplifier, now I think the human skills are going to have to be amplified even more. They're going to be necessary. We have to have that human element. And that's going to be the differentiator. And I think in the future, the people who are exhibiting those skills, the human connection, the emotional intelligence, and those are going to be the people who are going to continue growing and, getting better careers. Maybe that's a wrong prediction, but I really think the human connection is going to have to be there, and you're going to have to really learn how to talk to people.
Yeah, and that's kind of the crux of things. And this is the way I see it, but I'm not the expert here. And correct me if I'm wrong. The way I see it right now is that you've got this really great initiative of trying to get communication to be better, release tensions, implementing all this great stuff. But at the same time, you said it yourself, there's only so many positions and there's tons of people. So now against this communication, you've also got this sort of incremental, almost like fear, oh, well, I can't talk to HR because, I'm going to get canceled or I'm going to get fired or, and then, oh my God, I'm going to be competing with these 1,000 other people to get another job. How do you sort of tackle that and try
I
to
think
diminish
that's
that?
going to be that networking aspect. I think people are going to have to be more strategic about networking and how they approach job search. Because, anybody can just go online and make these bots apply for you for the jobs that you want to apply for. But you're going to have a lot more networking in person with humans to be able to grow in your career. I truly believe that. And I think it's being proactive. I always thought of like every interaction is an interview. Every interaction you have with anybody, it's an interview that could help you in the future. I've had situations that, somebody reached out to me for a job just because we've had interactions in the past. They've talked to me, we've connected in other settings, and they thought of me when a role opened up. And I think you got to prepare your network. Like, what does your network look like today? Maybe if you're looking for local roles, start being in events, going to events locally. If, virtual, if you have specific companies that you would love to work at, start connecting with people online that work in that company. You never know what's going to come up. I think that's going to be the differentiator, to be kind of picked out of that pile of resumes in an ATS system.
So, and here's what I was thinking too, just for anybody who's there and you've got all this on HR, how how do you, stand out besides networking? How do you stand out in that group of 1,000 resumes? Before somebody said, back when we had paper,
Yeah.
you cut them into weird shapes or you did this other stuff. What do you do now to make yourself stand?
So for me has been a lot of trying to become the thought leader virtually. So when they do go to my LinkedIn profile, they can read, where do I stand? What are my values? What, who am I? What is my story? So having that, to some extent, it is your professional image. However you want that to look like, I think that's going to also be important because some of these recruiters are using LinkedIn for passive recruitment, not just active. Active recruitment is when you have, resumes already submitted. Passive recruitment, especially for roles that are a little executive roles or higher profile roles, they will do passive recruitment on these social media tools and they will know a lot about you before they even bring you in front of a hiring manager. So that's also going to be, a big one. Like, who are you and who, what's your image? Who do you want to attract as an employer?
So it's just as important for these HR, maybe even more important for the recruiters to have that information there so that if they reach out to you, because I've had this too. I've had recruiters reach out to me for different things and I often wonder how they do it because I've gotten a request for what was it, like food service. I just got one today. I'll read it off. I literally got one today. Where
And
was
some
it?
of those might be like automated. They look at
Yeah.
specific keywords and then, hey, send this message to anybody who has this in their profile. But for some of the more, high profile roles, recruiters will look at keywords. They will look at different, experiences you've had, and they might passively reach out to you to learn more.
I'm glad you touched on experience. I'm really interested to hear where you stand on this because I had a little bit of a flame war on LinkedIn. No, I'm not going to make it easy to find. It was very unintentional. So the idea is that you're requesting, especially when it comes to like AI and computer programming and things like that, you're requesting people to not only have, these different degrees, but you've got a lot of very skilled people that just don't have the papers. These are people that coded in Russia, or coded in Bulgaria, coded in Africa even, and they just don't have the papers.
Yeah.
But they've got, maybe 10, 15, 20 years experience. Where do you fall on that side?
Yeah. So for me, I will challenge how we build job descriptions. And, this is one of the cool parts of Disrupt HR, right? We bring speakers on stages that they have these awesome ideas about the world of work and challenging kind of the status quo. There was one last year, Karen LaGraff, who talked about the bereavement process. But yeah, I would challenge the job description process. How are we building job descriptions? How are we evaluating jobs? It's really important. And again, it got to align with the culture you're trying to build and where does experience fit or, the years of schooling and degrees and all that. And there is another book that I loved. It was Jobs or Work Without Jobs. I think it's called. And this is where we're going towards. This gig economy is amplified even more now with AI. You have tools like Inch and Upwork and Fiverr where, people will come and get a job done. And maybe it's not a full-time role. Maybe you hire people by project or by specific skills. And this is where recruiting is tapping into the skills-based hiring. And that's going to be the future. What are the skills you have? Not necessarily the education, or you got to look at the experience that people are bringing at the table and the years of exposure they've had or things that they have accomplished, and don't put them in a box. Do not put that, you need the 5 years experience or, you need that bachelor's or master's. Look at the person as a whole. So that whole employee versus putting them in a box. So I will challenge when we look at how we analyzing jobs, looking at different data points and looking at this in a holistic way. I think it's going to be interesting how it plays out though. And again, like some companies might not be open to that and that's okay. But that is the culture that you're building, right? And you might be limited in the high performers that you might lose and along the line.
I love that. I love that, the way of looking at that. Actually, going into that and speaking about disrupting HR, before the show, you mentioned that you were cooking up something. Why don't you tell us a little more about it?
My goodness, yes. So, a lot of what I have been doing is supporting solo HR professionals, right, with their transition. So I find that especially for the solo HR, by solo HR meaning these small companies, 200-300 employees, maybe up to 500 or so, that they might have one employee, one HR person kind of doing it all, and they don't have the support they need. So a lot of times they join either local associations like NHRA, like the National Human Resource Association, or SHRM, or Disrupt HR. So I'm finding that we need a support group for these solo HR professionals. So, and thinking about shift happening all the time, I'm launching this Shift Happens membership in March, that it's going to be the go-to membership for solo HR professionals that want to navigate transitions with confidence. And that's where I'm going to have a lot of resources and tools and experts and a lot of peer coaching supporting each other and in this like-minded community. So I'm really excited for that. More to come, but feel free to follow me on LinkedIn and also go to my website, in the works with an X.org. So it's in the works, WORX.org, and get on my mailing list because I'll be sharing a lot more about this Shift Happens community.
That's excellent. And again, to our listeners, don't worry about, grabbing a pen and paper or anything. We'll have that in the show notes for you. We'll make it easy for you as always. And, it's been a great conversation, Alina. We are coming up pretty close to the time. Is there anything that you wish I would have asked but didn't ask, or, anything that we didn't cover that we should have covered today?
I think, I'm a recovering perfectionist, as you shared in the beginning there, but, I think it's important that, embrace the messiness, you guys. Like, this is, everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody I talk to is trying to figure out one way or another, whatever that is. You define your own success. You define, what that looks like for you, but be okay with the messiness. And, that's why I say I'm a recovering perfectionist, because it's, every day can be a challenge. Nothing has to be perfect. Just go with the 80%. Like, is it 80% okay? Let go of the rest of the 20%. Just take small moves, take tiny habits, and it builds up. It will build up along the line. I've been doing my business for the past 5.5 years now. And for 6 months, I just posted content online that was just motivational until I figured out, like, who do I serve? Who do I support? And initially was career coaching, and slowly moved into this strategic role as I started embracing and taking those tiny steps and embracing the messiness that comes with these transitions. So don't be afraid. I think, you have this here, your podcast. I love what you bring, and all the different voices. So thank you for trying to amplify my message and my voice. So I appreciate it, Chris.
Oh, we appreciate having you here as well. And I love that message, the messiness, and no, it doesn't mean I'm going to let my laundry go or the dishes. But, if I don't get the dishes all done tonight, I can always do it tomorrow morning. 80% is good, right? Just
Yeah.
leave it through the
Yeah.
track. All right. Well, thank you so much for being a guest, Alina. Again, very good insights. And, once again, thank you to all our listeners. And again, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that inspiration or motivation for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.